We acknowledge that we are on the ancestral lands of the Osage people, where the original borderless lands also were inhabited by the Illini, Iowa, Missouri, Oto, Quapaw, Second Fox, Sioux, and Kansas people. We honor them as we live, work, and play on these lands in Missouri. Greenways are outdoor spaces that connect people and places. Greenways in the St. Louis region are located on land stewarded by Native American people throughout generations.
One of the unique features here along the Dardenne Greenway is the restored prairie. Recently a sod farm, it's now a 34-acre prairie. We also have the natural floodplain for Dardenne Creek. Together, these provide valuable resources for pollinators, birds, and other native wildlife. Prairies of North America are large, open grasslands that once covered over 200 million acres, including about half of Missouri. Fewer than 1% of these prairies remain today, but you can see restored prairies in several areas along the greenways. The roots of the prairie plants go deep into the ground to help store stormwater, store carbon, and keep soil in place. Native plants cycle nutrients back into the soil and provide the fundamental basis for life on Earth. They provide food and shelter for native organisms throughout the food chain. Fire is a natural part of life for native ecosystems here in the Midwest. These habitats depend on fire to eliminate invasive plants and restore nutrients into the soil. Low-intensity fires like prescribed burns help to release the nutrients in plant materials so that the nutrients are more available in the soil for these growing native plants. The prairie plants are protected from these fires because their plant buds grow at or beneath ground level.
Here at Dardenne Greenway at Bluebird Meadow, we are surrounded by a lot of trees and vegetation and wildlife. The native people who inhabited these lands lived with the pollinators. And the bee population was also encouraged and lived with the people as they moved across the lands. This symbiotic relationship was very important and significant as the bees pollinated the various foods that they cultivated on the lands.
Native plants have relationships with other native pollinators and wildlife. They also have relationships with humans. Part of the indigenous way of knowing is knowing what part of the plants to prepare, how to prepare them, when to prepare them to receive the gifts of their medicine and food. Bees, butterflies, and other insects are drawn to the gray-headed coneflower. They eat the nectar in exchange for their cross-pollination services. All kinds of herbivores, from caterpillars to woodchucks, eat the leaves. The rattlesnake master is a signature plant of the tallgrass prairie. Its name comes from the idea that it can help reduce the effects of snake venom. Bees, beetles, butterflies, flies, and wasps are all drawn to this flower for its nectar. Blazing stars are an important part of the complex community of plants here in the tallgrass prairie. Many types of insects visit the flowers, birds eat the seeds, herbivores eat the thick underground stems. Wild bergamot gets its name from its scent, which is similar to that of the bergamot orange grown in Italy. Bees, butterflies, wasps, and moths all visit this flower to drink its nectar. There are 23 native species of goldenrod here in Missouri. Goldenrod blooms at the same time as some of the wind-pollinated ragweeds, pigweeds, so it often gets blamed for allergies. But if you take a closer look, goldenrod is not to blame. Goldenrod is pollinated by insects carrying the pollen, rather than the wind blowing it through the air as some of the other plants are pollinated. Goldenrods typically bloom late in the growing season, so they're a critical nectar source for beetles, bees, butterflies, flies, wasps, and other insects. For many of these bugs, this is their last food before the freezing weather puts a stop to their activity. The plants featured in these videos are used by Native American people for medicine and food. Part of the indigenous ways of knowing includes knowing when to prepare these plants, how to prepare them, what parts of the plants to use, because many of these plants also do have toxic properties. Throughout the generations, Native American people have handed down the teachings of when to harvest plants, what parts to use, how best to prepare them to receive their gifts of medicine and food. Because when prepared incorrectly or using the wrong parts or at the wrong time, these plants can be quite dangerous.
The sacred relationship between Native American people and the ancestral land where the Greenways are located continues today.